Hello, this is Lauren Brantley Books, and I'm here today with a review of The Sea of Trolls by Nancy Farmer. This is a middle grade historical fantasy, though I honestly think fantasy lovers of any age should read this book, it's that good. The book takes place in 793 AD in Saxony. It begins with 11-year-old Jack, who is becoming an apprentice to his village's local bard. In this world, not only do bards tell stories and folk songs, but they are also magicians, so Jack gets to learn magic. Jack lives with his mother, father, and little sister Lucy, and one day his peaceful life is shattered when he and Lucy are kidnapped by Viking raiders and sold into slavery. Now Jack gets swept up into this big fantasy adventure and ends up having to go into Jotunheim, the land of the trolls, if he ever wants to return home and save his sister. This is a really amazing historical fantasy. It takes place in 793 AD, so this is a time when Christianity was really spreading across Northern Europe. This takes place in Saxony, and we see the ways in which Christianity mingles and clashes with the local pagan traditions. There's a lot of good talk about religion, gods, faith, the afterlife. Things get even more interesting when we hear about the Norse religion, and this book is a pretty good introduction to some of the Norse myths and legends. I thought the interplay of different religions was really interesting and added a lot of world building. There's something very real and grounded about talking about religious faith, and that sort of subject makes for excellent conversations in the book. I like that this book brings attention to a less talked about aspect of Viking culture, the slave economy. Here in the West, we tend to romanticize Vikings as these glorious warriors, but we seldom talk about the fact that Vikings were indeed human traffickers. Their society relied on having a steady supply of slaves to do the grunt work. This book does not hold back showing the horrors that the Vikings inflicted upon others, whether it was through raids, enslavement, or other violence. These aren't the fun Vikings you might see in the How to Train Your Dragon series. These are killers, and Nancy Farmer isn't afraid to show that dark side of their culture. At the same time, we get to know several of the Vikings as people. We see their personalities, their relationships, even their home lives. Despite the fact that these characters do horrible things, they are Vikings after all, they are still likable. Olaf Onebrow in particular was an enjoyable character, even though he was literally the guy who kidnapped Jack into slavery. And later we see him participate in the murderous pillage of a town. It takes one heck of a writer to be able to write a character who literally pillages and enslaves people for a living, and still make me like them. I think one thing that helped was seeing Olaf's soft spot for Lucy. It was both adorable and horrifying to see 7-year-old Lucy wrap this big murderous Viking around her finger. Olaf treats her like a princess, and he even later warms up to Jack in a way. In time he becomes almost like a mentor to Jack, but at the same time he never stops being the murderous Olaf Onebrow. That juxtaposition just makes him all the more interesting a character. Flora Gill was also more complex than we've been first led to believe. She's a wannabe Viking, a shield maiden to be exact, so has to prove herself by any means necessary. At first she seems like a brutish bully with a death wish, but the more we spend time with her on Jack's quest, the more we see there is to this character. She definitely has some nice character development during her time with Jack in Jotunheim, and when we learn her backstory, it's genuinely heartbreaking. We get to learn the titular trolls in this book later on, and honestly the Troll Kingdom was easily my favorite part of this book. Like the Vikings themselves, the trolls are more complex and more human than they outwardly seem. Like the Vikings, we see them do some terrible things. Though most of the trolls' violence takes place off-page, and we hear more about their violent deeds than actually see them. This isn't a bad thing though, as the time we spend in the Trolls' Kingdom is spent showing their complex culture and relationship to humanity. I really found myself liking the trolls by the end, even though the book makes it clear that they are very dangerous creatures. Sometimes I wonder who is more monstrous, the Vikings or the trolls. Like any good fantasy adventure, we get a smattering of all sorts of fantasy beasts. The dragons, giant bears, eagles, and spiders. Very Tolkien-esque. It adds to the sense of adventure, and it's really fun seeing Jack and Flora Gill have to work together to get through all these obstacles. These are two characters who cannot stand each other in the beginning. I mean, Flora Gill literally helped enslave Jack and Lucy, but by the end these two have definitely built up a lot of respect for one another, maybe even a friendship of sorts. I absolutely love The Sea of Trolls. It was honestly easily my favorite Viking fantasy, and probably one of the best fantasies I've read in a long time. This book is one in a trilogy, and I will definitely be checking out the other two and be back with reviews for those two books. I highly recommend this book for any lover of fantasy, so be sure to check it out. I am Lauren Brantley Books, and please let me know if you have any suggestions of what I should review next. If you want to hear more reviews from me, feel free to subscribe. Also, like on this video goes a long way. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.